Welcome back then folks to day 2 of Special Projects Pack number 8. This time a build which a lot of you will have some nostalgia for, that's for sure. From Gran Turismo 2 comes my representation of the legendary HKS Drag Skyline, the R33 GT-R shape. Of course there were 2 HKS drag cars in that game. There was the, I think it was 180SX as well, which was rear-wheel drive, and then there was this one which was all-wheel drive. And I believe for a while this actually did hold a world record in drag racing, I think. It may still have the record, but I doubt it at this point. But this one I will say, and I shouldn't say this about my own build of course, but for most players you won't use this car that much. This is 100% just a novelty build. It is tremendously quick, but it's not that useful, at least in the way that I've set it up, for anything other than straight line performance, because that was kind of the whole point of the car, even in the older games. So as far as the build, of course, as I put on screen, you can grab this player's design down in the description. You will need to fit the wide body as well, and I believe I actually, if memory serves, actually changed the aero on this one. I removed the rear wing, and I believe I removed the side skirts that the player had as well, or something like that. I definitely removed the wing though, so tons of different players have done HKS liveries. None of them are necessarily perfect compared to real life, because it's a very, splotchy looking livery, so it's difficult to get it spot on. But I like what they'd done. It had the yellow window banner, it looked good enough. Certainly if you compare it to Gran Turismo 2's graphics. This is an expensive tune though, so I would only recommend doing this if you've got a spare Skyline and a spare amount of cash to get the R92CP engine, because that is what we're running. So 769 points, extremely high as you can see. You want your stage 1 weight. We've got sports hards anyway, so ignore that. As far as the club sports section, we've got the stage 2 weight, the power restrictor and the ballast. For the semi-racing stuff, the fully customised computer. It's such a shame that you can't put the high RPM turbo on it. It's pretty dumb, to be honest, that you can't do that, because for those who don't know, in real life, the R92CP, at least as far as I can recall, is actually the most powerful Group C car ever built in qualifying form. I think it had something like 1200 or 1400 horsepower in qualifying, something like that. So it's ridiculous that you can't do that in the game anymore. In fact, it has, ironically, less power than the drag Skyline had in Gran Turismo 2. It was like 1011, so it's just a little bit less. Unfortunately, we can't do anything about that. We've got the fully customised diff. The stage 3 weight I haven't bothered with. I'm just going to jump to the ultimate section. I believe oh actually no, I'm saying that I haven't done that. The reason why I didn't do that, I'm remembering now, is the weight. You don't want it as light as possible, because we're making it the weight that it was in Gran Turismo 2. I forgot for a second. 1280 kilos, so that's why I didn't do that. As far as the racing stuff, we've got the race silencer. I've fitted the drilled discs and of course the racing pads, the race suspension, race flywheel, the torque vectoring center diff. Some people might set that up a little bit differently for this one, depending on what you prefer for drag racing. And of course the fully customized transmission. I've opted for racing softs, because of course it's a drag car, so you want them sticky tyres on it, especially with 4-wheel drive. It just gets a ridiculous amount of grip. But again, different people have their own preferences. I do have NOS fitted, surprise surprise, the hydraulic handbrake just for manoeuvrability, and likewise with the steering angle adapter, because being such a straight line build, having any extra manoeuvrability does help. And then as far as the ultimate section, I've just slapped the carbon prop shaft on there as well. It is kind of a shame that the real drag R33 wasn't lighter, and then we could make use of those weight loss advantages. I guess if you don't care about being too accurate to Gran Turismo 2, you could just go ahead and make it lighter anyway, but of course I wanted it to be more of a replica. So we've got the softs fitted. For the suspension, I've opted for 110mm on the springs, anti-roll on 4, very low compression or actually no, not expansion, very low compression I should say on the dampers, which basically means that the car can squat down very easily, but then we've put the expansion all the way up. So it's rigid on the return, but it squats down very easily. So it doesn't bounce around too much, but it allows you to very 4x4 or SUV style. If you see a fast 4x4 like like my old Touareg V10, it launches off the line and really sags under its suspension, and that sagging helps to soak up a bit of that launch instead of bottoming out the springs. So that's what I've got on this particular car for that exact reason, and you can see the car really dive as it launches off the line. For the frequency on the springs though, we've got 2 and 1.6. So a little bit stiffer on the front for the exact same reason as well. You don't really need the front end to sag quite as much, because obviously most of the momentum, most of the, I guess, G-force you could say, I'm not recalling the correct term right now, but the weight balance or the weight shift will go over the back more than the front. So you don't need to go crazy in that regard on the front. As far as the camber, that is neutral to get as much tyre contact to the road as possible, and likewise with the toe. There's no real need to have toe angle for straight line performance, you just drag in the tyres, so we want them to run flat, straight and true. As far as the diff, we've got 10, 30 and 20, and then a 50-50 split. Now here's the thing. A 50-50 split is really good off the line, but I know for a fact that some people will not favour that for an overall drag. Now the great thing about Gran Turismo 7, over the at least some of the previous games, is of course you can change that while you're driving. So I'm sure there's a way that if you were skilled enough, you could time it just right to switch from 50-50 off the line, and then maybe switch to, say, 70-30 by clicking through the buttons on the controller to get more of that power to the back end, and you probably would shave just a little bit of extra time. So I'll leave that to you to play around with if you want to. We've got the NOS set all the way to power. As far as the transmission, I've opted for 470 on the auto setting, and in a very throwback way, because as many of you know, I don't usually bother with individual ratios in this game as much. It's not usually necessary. I actually have, and the reason why I have this time around is because with the setup that I'm using, it's got a really good top end speed, but it always changes gear at the wrong time for getting really good times. So like for measuring 0 to 60, it would change from first to second at like 55 miles an hour, ruining the 0 to 60 time. So I wanted to stretch it out so that each gear goes past that point. So first gear goes past 60 miles an hour, second gear goes past 100. So you get better times to those speeds. So we've got 2.05, 1200, 860, 650, and 520 even, and 4.110 for the final drive. I'll tell you about the specs on that in just a second when we go out to the track in terms of how quick it actually is. You want 41 kilos of ballast to bring us up to 1280, which of course is the Gran Turismo 2 number. I'll put that all the way to the front to again reduce the back end a little bit. Different people may have different preferences on that, because technically having less weight over the rear wheels would be slightly less grip, but I'll leave it down to you. As far as the ECU and the restrictor, they are untouched. Downforce, of course, is as low as possible. We've got our medium RPM turbo fitted, and for the rest of the stuff, it was pretty simple, as you could see. So that's it for the build. Now, of course, we need to jump out to the track and show you what it can do. Now, I've taken it to Le Mans in, I think it's the Hypercar event, the 800-point event, something like that, where you can use the NOS and, you know, the weather's good, etc., just to show you how quick it is. On Route X, which is where I actually tested this car, using NOS, it has a 0 to 60 time of 2.2 seconds, but then the 0 to 100 mile an hour time is actually more impressive, 3.8. That's very rapid for 0 to 100. 0 to 200 miles an hour in 11 seconds, and probably the most impressive one of all, this will go from 0 to 250 miles an hour in 20 seconds, which is properly quick. And if you don't use NOS, the top speed is still 260 miles an hour. You can definitely get more top speed out of it if you gear it for special stage Route X racing and slipstream people, but that's not the purpose of the build. I wanted it to be able to do 260 pretty close to the red line, so that it just uses the gearbox, you know, under its own power, in effect. And as you can see here at Le Mans, it has no issue whatsoever absolutely decimating hypercars and supercars. So like I said, this is 100% a novelty build. It's very unstable through corners because it's designed purely for straight lines, but again, I kind of like that because it harkens back to what the car was like in Gran Turismo 2. These drag cars were unstable. They weren't the easiest thing to use, and that was the whole point. So if you've got some spare cash and a Skyline, you could do it for a bit of fun, and of course, show the designer some love from me. But stick around for the rest of the builds in pack number 8, and of course I'll see you next time. But for now, thanks for watching.